morning. It's good for me to be back. I heard really good things about, Josh 3 weeks ago. I took y'all through as we've been talking about don't underestimate the power of, and he took y'all through the power of doing good in your life, which is a very powerful thing. The Bible talks a lot about doing good. Todd, a couple weeks ago, talked about don't underestimate. You got to have them fitted because they move around. It's a joke. Okay, so Todd talked about spiritual disciplines because the truth is, I don't know if you realize this, it's one of those things that I always preached or taught to my kids. You become like your habits. So the things that you build into your life and that you consistently do, don't ever underestimate the power of those things. So if you build spiritual disciplines in your life, you decide you're going to spend time consistently listening to God, getting to know God, follow God, it pays off in your life. And last week, Brian talked about the power of other people or each other in our lives because God made us that way. We were built for this. This morning, I want to talk about don't underestimate the power of going deep in your life and really about depth in your life. Now, this is one of those things that a lot of us struggle with, and sometimes we don't even understand what it means to have depth in your life or to go deep in your life, because depth always means work. It always means time. It always means effort. And if you go deep into anything, you realize there's not going to necessarily be an immediate benefit. It's a process, a difficult process, but one that you do because you realize this process will reap rewards. Years ago, I was talking to a lady, and I was talking about her relationship to God and how she needed to go deep, and there were so many things to learn to build her strength and her confidence, and this is what she said. And I know there are people here that you probably send me an email after this. They're not going to like this. She said, I don't do that. She said, I just trust God. I believe God. And I said, I understand. But, the question is, what happens when difficult times and difficult things come if you don't have depth? God takes away my difficult times. My relationship to God, something I pray, it goes away. I don't have to. Listen, let me go ahead and tell you, it's not going to work that way. It never works that way. What she is saying, God will rescue me. What I am saying is, absolutely, God will rescue you because God will teach you to go what? Deep. So that when you have struggles in life and difficult things happen in life, you have gone deep into your relationship with Him. He has become the foundation of your life, and you are stable, you are steady, you are not moved because you have built your life on a foundation that does not move. Not because God takes all your problems away. Not because God fixes everything the way you would like it to be fixed. Instead, God becomes your great strength, and it is in that other people, as they know you and they watch your life and they listen to you, they realize God is real. God is real in their lives. Because listen, I would collapse under that. I don't know where I would turn if I had to go through things like that, but they have a strength in their life that just takes them through those things. I was reading Jim Collins' book last year, his latest book, called Great by Choice. One of the things that he talks about when he's talking about great leaders is how some of the things about great leaders we misunderstand and may sound very negative in life, because most great leaders work and plan on things going wrong. I know that we hear, no, great leaders just say, everything's going to go right. I'm always going to be positive. It'll always go my way. I'm going to believe that this is going to happen, and it will happen. And the truth is, those leaders don't last very long. They don't. Because they get totally caught off guard when things don't go well in their life. In the second chapter of his book, he talks about two guys that in the early 1900s both had great experience as far as exploration is concerned, and they were involved in a race to the South Pole, and it was kind of an epic race. Both of them started about the same time, both similar ages, but two totally different approaches. And a guy named Amundsen, who was the one who eventually won, he had a totally different approach. He planned on all the things that could go wrong. It's not because he's a pessimist. It's not because he wants things to go wrong. Listen, it's because he understands things will go wrong. And so I'm going to plan on those things going wrong and prepare myself so that when they do go wrong, I'm not caught off guard. Scott, the other guy who prepared totally different. He did not work near as hard. He didn't train near as hard. He didn't prepare near as hard. He staked his adventure on new technologies, listen, that had not been tested. No one knew what they would do down in the South Pole in the extreme cold that they would face. And that's what he built himself on. Not been tested. See, here's the thing about being a Christian. The Bible's been tested. It's been tested. I remember somebody told me, he said, well, you just have a blind faith. I do not have a blind faith. I've built my faith on something that generations and generations and generations and generations before me have built their faith on. It's tested. You can go back historically for thousands of years and look at those who have built their faith on God Himself, on Christ Himself for 2,000 years after knowing who He is. And you can see those people have a strong, a firm foundation. And if you can't test it, if you can't challenge it, this is the thing that always is strange to me. I understand why we do it, but people with their faith don't allow it to be challenged, don't allow it to be tested. I'm not going to speak of a religion that we are struggling with some terrorists, but if you challenge it, same thing. We eliminate you. If it has to work that way, it doesn't work. And there's nothing wrong with someone challenging what you believe. Because if it's sure, if it's strong, if it works, it can be challenged. That may sound negative. It's not negative. It's positive. It means that it works. So Amundsen and Scott, they both went on this journey. One prepared well for all the things that would go wrong. He actually won the race. Scott, who did not prepare well, not only did he lose the race, he and his entire group did not survive the journey. Because they ran out of food, they ran out of supplies, they ran out of shelter, because they did not plan on the things that could go wrong and going wrong. What was really interesting, when Amundsen came back, he never mentions luck. He never mentions, the difficult times, because he planned on those things. He knew things would go wrong. When they went back and they found Scott's diaries as he passed away, because he kept a diary of it, that's all he talked about. Bad luck. Didn't go the way I thought. Hoped it would be different. Whatever. Because he had not planned on those things. I'm not talking about scare tactics. I'm not talking about, people that run around and the world is ending and trying to get you, to do something extreme. I'm just saying that God says you're going to go through difficult times. Life's not going to be easy. And if you build a strong foundation, a firm foundation, if you go deep, what happens is you find yourself built on something that will take you through those difficult times, those struggles. So let's talk a little bit about depth. And I want to go to a passage that Jesus, where he has this parable. And Jesus, if you don't know this, but in the 4 Gospels, Jesus gives 35 different parables. And a parable is a story that illustrates something so that you would look at it and say, oh, that's what it means. And so here's one of those parables in the New Testament. You find it in Matthew chapter 7, and where Jesus says this, the Sermon on the Mount. He says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine, he's talking about himself and talking about as he speaks from God, and acts upon them. That means it's not just about hearing them, but then, taking those words and say, whoa, that's important. I need to do something about that. I need to build my future, my plans, my activities on these things. He says, acts upon them, may be compared to a wise man who built his house on what? The rock, yeah. So most of us, know that story, right? If you grew up and you went to VBS, they taught you the wise man built some people know a house upon the rock. The wise man built his, come on. The wise man built his house upon the rock, and the rains came tumbling down. And that's actually the whole point of the story, is he builds his house on the rock, and then the next verse goes on to say, and the rain fell, And the floods came. What? God. The rains came, the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against the house. And he says, and yet it did not. Let me say that again. And yet all of these things came, all of these difficult things, all of these things that we wouldn't wish them on ourselves. We wouldn't say, God, bring them on. You know, we would be the very opposite. But they did come. But the wise man who had built his house upon rock, when they come against his house, means his life, his house stands. It does not fall. And it says, for it had been founded on the rock, a sure foundation. Next verse says this, everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act upon them. In other words, you don't build a foundation. You don't go deep. He says he should be compared to a foolish man who built his house on the sand. In other words, it's probably a beautiful spot. You know, it's a great place to build a house, but he didn't build it on any kind of foundation. Then it goes on to say the rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell. And then it adds this, and great was its, that means, whoa, made the news. This house is destroyed by the storm. Fell apart. Because if you look at the houses, Jesus doesn't mention them, but they probably look similar. I mean, it's not like you looked at one and said, you know, that house is going to stand, that one's just weak, it's in shambles. He says it all had to do with the foundation that these two people built their life upon, where one life, the life that fell, might have been someone doing good things, probably was. I was reading one commentary, and I understand how people, you know, because, you know, parables can be interpreted a lot of different ways, and said, you know, both men were Christians, and da-da. I don't know that both men were Christians, because that wouldn't make sense, right? The whole point is to build your life upon a foundation, and one person does not build their life upon a foundation. And he says, you know, both people thought that they were probably saved. I don't think that's true. I think both people, and this is the way it works in life, both people thought their house was safe. And there are a lot of people who've convinced themselves that their life is safe. Why? I'm a good person. I'm better than most people. Try to do good things, you know. I go with the flow. There's safety in numbers, you know. Everyone is going this way. Everyone does it this way. Everyone, you know, their attention is on this. And as long as you go with the crowd, listen, there's safety in numbers. And that is true if a wolf is after you. It's not true if everybody's going off the cliff, right? Then it's a bad thing. Remember your mama? When she taught you and you said, hey, why did you do that? And you said, well, my friend Johnny, and she would say, right? If Johnny jumped in a fire, you know, remember that speech? That speech has been around forever because my mom gave it to me a lot. And I needed it a lot. You know, I had to hear that a lot. Both thought their house was safe. I think this is the challenge for your life and for my life. In fact, I would put it to you this morning. I think it's a great challenge. What have you built your house upon? What have you built your life upon? What would you say you have dug down deep, and this is the foundation of my life? I am trusting that this is stable, that this will last, that this will support the whole weight of my hope, my dreams. What have you built your life upon? And that's what Jesus is doing. He's challenging them. The wise man, he knows what he's built his life upon. The foolish man, basically, he doesn't know. He just built a nice house. He did a good job, probably trying to be a good person, but he has no concept of what his life is built upon. And so when the storms come, you're challenged. You know, can I make it? Why are these things happening? Is God somehow trying to get revenge with me? What have I built my life upon? One house stands, one house falls, and when the one house falls, boy, great is the fall. That means the crowds are absolutely amazed. Whoa, how did that happen? I thought that was what life was all about. I thought that's the way life was supposed to be. The disciples actually went through this. At one point, a rich young ruler, that means religiously, He would have been very powerful, very on the upper echelon. He's very successful, everything about his life. You know, if you were a young Jewish boy in the time, your mom would have been saying, if you could only be like him, right? I mean, that's who she would want you to be like. And he came and he said, you know, what must I do to inherit the kingdom? What is it that I'm still lacking? And Jesus kind of challenges him, you know, on his Jewishness. And he says, I'm doing all the laws like that. He says, okay, just one thing you lack. Sell everything you have, which means stop putting your hope and your trust in what you have and the things that you have like everybody else, and put your hope and trust in me. Sell everything you have, come and follow me. And it says he walked away because he was very, very wealthy. And the disciples, just like most people, struggled with it. We don't understand. I mean, if this guy can't make it, because humanly that's the way we see it. If this guy can't make it, if that's not the kind of life, then what is the kind of life? What is it that we should be looking for? And Jesus in that passage is challenging them whether or not their life is built on Him. That's what He's challenging them on. Because He will stand. He will not be moved. The storms of life will not overcome Him. And Jesus, by His life, proves this. Because Jesus goes to the cross, everybody deserts Him, everybody runs away, and Jesus comes out at the cross the winner, not the loser. Because the storms of life, the difficulties of life, even taking my sin and your sin on His shoulders, could not overcome Him, could not defeat Him. When you talk about going deep, we'll make a few statements about going deep, but you know, I can't help but think about deep sea fishing. Anybody like deep sea fishing? I like the idea of deep sea fishing. But it's just the way I'm built. It's just the way, you know, the way I am, and I have to, you know, just come to grips with it, and finally, I'm almost there. But, you know, I don't do well in situations where there's a lot of motion and rocking and all that. So, you know, years ago, I went to Universal the like Disney World thing, and my son, the first thing he wanted to do was get on the Hulk, you know, which was a, you know, ridiculous version, you know, of a roller coaster. And so that's the first thing I did. What was I thinking? Got on the roller coaster with him. We got off, you know, the Hulk, you have the big giant green. I'm white. I mean, I have no color in me at all. And so for the next 2 hours of being there, I sat on a bench, you know, like this, you know, hoping color would come back, because I just don't do well with all those motions. And my deep sea fishing experiences have proven that out, you know, very well also. Years ago, when Jordan was a teenager, I decided he wanted to go with some of his friends. A couple of us got on with another friend that owned a boat, and he at one time was a fishing, you know, a charter captain, and would take people out. So we went out into the water. It was pretty rough that day. They said it wasn't, but they don't know anything. But it was pretty rough that day. I'm not feeling good at all. I go into the middle of the boat, and, you know, at least there's some shade. I'm trying to find some breeze, and I'm just, you know, I feel sick as a dog. They're off the back. They're having a great time. All the boys fishing, trying to catch things. You know, I decided I need to be with them. You know, I just need to suck it up. Maybe I shouldn't use that word, you know, but, you know, just go out there and be with them anyway and just struggle through it. So I get up, I go out to the boat, I walk out to the boat, I open my mouth to say something, didn't really say anything, you know, hurled over the back of the boat. And that's when I learned, when you're at your worst, your most difficult, painful, if you realize this, all of your friends will desert you. Even your friends will desert you. They all left. They all went to the front of the boat to fish and leave me over the back of the boat, you know, all by myself. So I chased them around. I went to the front of the boat. They go to the back of the boat. You know, they're like, the sick guy doesn't need to go with us, right? So I don't do well with that part of it. But you know what I've learned to do well with is going deep. I've found that going deep really changes me. Going deep really is something I need to do. It changes the way I understand life, the way I feel about life. It doesn't mean all my problems go away, but it absolutely does mean that as I go through those problems, as I face those problems, I can face them entirely different. So let me give you a couple of statements this morning. First of all, depth, and this is what the parable teaches, depth determines your ability to withstand struggles, storms, ... which means you just put it in there. This is the whole point of Jesus' statement. You go deep. You dig deep. You find a foundation that is immovable. And incidentally, in this passage, in this part of the Beatitudes, Jesus is an either-or in every one of them. It's not multiple choice. It's either-or. Because Jesus is saying, you are either deep with me, you've either built your life on a foundation of me and who I am, or you haven't. Anything else is not going to stand up to the storms. Because building your life on something that lasts is the only thing that gives you the ability to go through all of those storms, all of those struggles, all of those difficulties. The other techniques and other things may help, may make you fit, but you have to have a firm foundation that you know this foundation does not move. This foundation stays the same. The promises, the hopes that are built on this foundation, those promises and those hopes, they always last, they always come through because that's who He is. This is another one of Jesus' parables, one of His stories, and you'll find this one in Matthew 13. Jesus tells the story of, it's often called the story of the sower or the story of the seed, but for you and I, it's the story of the soil. And he tells this story. He says, listen, a farmer went out to plant some seeds, and which is what farmers would do. This is what parables are, just stories that they would understand. And as he scattered them across the field, some seeds fell on a footpath. That's where people would walk, and it would be hard, almost like concrete, so the seeds wouldn't have a chance there. So the birds came and they ate them. And then the next verse says, other seed fell on shallow soil. And this is what he's targeting. People who their lives are shallow soil. They have no depth, and they're not going to build any depth. They don't want to live that way. It's too much work. It's too difficult. I don't want to go there. It sounds negative. The shallow soil had underlying rock. These seeds, catch this, they sprout quickly. Because that's what people with a shallowness in their life, they're jumping from thing to thing to go, yay, real quickly, but there's another problem with the shallow soil. The plants soon wilt under the sun, and since they didn't have, what? Deep roots, they die, they pass away. Since they didn't have deep roots, they can't handle the everyday things of life. I always like the story because every one of us would know that the plants need the sun in order to live, right? We'd say, yes, you got to have them. And yet it's the sun that also wilts them and destroys them because they don't have the other part of life, which is the deep root system. And actually the seed has landed on soil that won't allow roots to go deep. In this case, the gospel, the message of who Jesus is, it is the life. The seed has life in it. And the only question is, when the seed falls on your life, has it fallen on a life that will allow it to grow deep into your life? In fact, I really think that's the question when you talk about going deep. The question is, will I allow God, through His Son Jesus, to go deep into me? Because that's what gives me strength, the fact that He has now sunk the truth and who He is deeply into my being, into my activities, into my habits, into the way I see life. And when He sinks deep into me, then I'm the one that is changed. And I'm not looking for a quick fix. I'm not looking, for it has to work out every day the way I want it to. Instead, I'm willing to take the time, let Him grow deep, because it brings strength. It brings confidence. It brings a deep sense of peace and joy in life. Life takes on an entirely different flavor because He goes deep inside of us. He sinks His roots deep inside of us. And that's exactly what he's talking about. Here's the second statement. Depth isn't easily recognized, and it's not with plants, it's not with buildings, and there's a reason. Because depth's not easily seen. You look at a house, you don't know what it's built on. Anybody watch HGTV? Come on, guys, I know you do, because your wife has already told on you. And I do at night when I go to bed, and, it's time to go to bed, and I go, and Joni's got HGTV on, and it's one of those things that it's funny to me. It's interesting because, guys, my favorite is they flip houses, and so there's this couple that flips houses, and they go and they buy them sight unseen. And my first thought is, are you crazy? That's my first thought. You bought a house sight unseen. You've never had a chance to look at it, or they drive by it and go, oh, and then they get into the house, and every episode is the same, right? They get in there, and they start making some cosmetic fixes, and they're going to flip it, and they're going to make a lot of money. And then the contractor, the guy that works for them, he comes and he goes, we have a problem. And every episode the same way. As we pull up the floor, we have a problem. There are termites down there, or you've got a whole family of badgers living under your house. Something, or they open up a wall and they say, we have a problem. You have, 400-year-old pipes that are leaking, and then, of course, usually if that's going to blow the budget, they come back and say, oh, we were wrong, sorry, but they have to go to commercial first, and on the commercial, they sell you all the things, for having a problem, and then they come back and say, oh, it wasn't really a problem, they weren't badgers, it was just somebody left a stuffed toy and we got mixed up or something like that. But would you want to go buy a house and not know, what it's built on, the foundation? What's really going on? And usually you hire an inspector, and his job is as best he can. He may crawl under the house or go into the attic space and try to find out, is there anything hidden, unseen, that you don't know is going to be a problem, and that you realize, I need to know if it's going to be a problem. It's the unseen part that kind of, freaks us out, because we don't know how to do that. We don't know, what's going on. I bought a house a couple of years ago, and a lot of the lights didn't work. And some of the switches didn't work. And I thought, oh, man. So I brought somebody in, and immediately the electrician says, here's the deal. I can't tell you, why. He said, the only way I can find out is I have to climb in there and, pull things off, and then I can tell you why. And I think he worked for that show, because he then came back and said, oh, it wasn't that big a deal, So I think he's on that show or something like that. Foundations aren't seen. You don't know. In fact, we're going to answer this in just a few minutes. I got to skip over this one about, well, how do you know? But, that's the problem is, we just tend to see what the house looks like on the outside. We tend to see what people look like on the outside. Our tendency is to adopt this idea. If I just smile and act like everything's okay, and I only think positive thoughts, won't that fix everything? And here's the answer. No, it won't fix everything. There has to be a realism, in your life. When I talk with someone or want to work with someone and that's their attitude in life, I'm always very suspicious. I'm very cautious, because I say, you really can't face it this way. And facing life with a foundation built on Christ is not really a scary thing, because the foundation is so good and so strong, you realize, I don't know what's coming up, but He'll take me through whatever is coming up, because He's able to do it. He's done it before. He's going to be faithful through that. Third thing is this. The goal of going deep is to build a stronger foundation. That's the whole point. You don't go deep just to build knowledge or to, in theology, in my field, people a lot of times go deep so they can use really, really, really big words. And I have people, write me emails and call me and ask me, what is your, and they'll come up with all these words. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Can you just speak English, and say, what do you think about heaven? Or what do you know that? Because it's a lot easier for me to deal with that than the words. Actually, I do know the words, but you get lost in all that stuff if you think that's what it means to go deep. Going deep means you know what you're built on. You have dug down. You know where your security is and your strength. No matter what language you use, that's what you realize. That's the depth, not the language. Okay, look at this verse. This is Proverbs. I had to throw one Old Testament in this morning. The Proverbs says this: when the whirlwind passes, the wicked is no more, but the righteous has an everlasting foundation. That's Solomon saying, those who put their hope and their trust in the Lord, they have an everlasting foundation. Or I want you to look also, this is in Luke, and this is the same parable, which is what makes it so wonderful, because more than one gospel writer gives you the same parable, but Luke records the parable a little different, and I really like what Luke says. I want you to catch what Luke says. He says, everyone who comes to me, this is Jesus' words as he records them, hears my words and acts on them, I will show you what he is like. And this is what he says. He says, he is like a man building a house who what? Dug deep. See, it's a different emphasis how he understood or heard Jesus. It wasn't just that he built his house upon a rock. He dug deep and laid a foundation on the rock. He found the rock, and I like that because that's what you do. You say, I want a rock to build on, and I'm willing to dig deep. I'm willing to challenge things. I'm willing to find out what stands and what lasts. And it says, and when the flood occurred and the torrent burst against the house, it could not shake it because it had been built well. And his building well was not talking about this part of the house. It was talking about this part of the house, where it had been anchored and what had been anchored on. So now, number 4. This stronger foundation also helps us in this way. It helps us by bringing transformation to our core, to who we are. The foundation actually changes the house. So, the house and its core, its beams, its values, what it's been built on, just like a life, those things are totally transformed when they are anchored to something that is not going to move. And that's actually also the point of what Jesus is saying. You are a different person because you have built your house upon something that is immovable, something that is not going to change. Look one more time. Here's a verse out of Matthew, going back to that same passage in Matthew. When Jesus had finished these words, telling his story about the house built on the rock, the crowds were absolutely amazed at his teaching. For he was teaching them as one having authority. In other words, this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy is someone who understands what the foundation is about, building on that foundation. And he says, and he was not teaching the same way as the scribes were teaching. One of the habits of the scribes was the scribes would try to teach, and a lot of times their teaching was not built on anything that they'd really could firmly say they built their life upon. They taught a lot of law, doing good, things like that. And they loved to go back and quote people, that had come before them that you would have great respect for. And the reason they quoted those people is so that you would then have respect for what they actually said. I know you saying like Jim Collins or something. Yeah, that's right. They're trying to gain some kind of authority or respect by quoting someone. And the reason was that the crowds realized is because they lacked this authority or this assuredness in their own life and saying, I built my life upon these things. That was not the way Jesus spoke. When Jesus spoke of things that he knew, and it came across. People were absolutely, in fact, this language in the Greek is not the language of being amazed and being wowed, because there are other words in the Greek that would be used for this. We just don't have translations for these. This is the word of being more than amazed. It's going way beyond being wowed. They're like, this is a whole nother a realm of understanding and words that were rarely used, like, whoa. This guy says things, he knows what he's talking about. It's clear, by listening to him, he's been there before. He absolutely understands it. This is the way your life is supposed to be. Where you've built your life upon the rock. This is what my life is supposed to be. I built my life upon the rock, upon a relationship to Jesus Christ. And the one thing I can speak clearly about to you is he will not fail you. He will stand. He will not be shaken. I don't have that same confidence about my own abilities. I fail sometimes. I struggle many times. But the one thing that I can say for sure, looking at my own life and looking at those who have come before me, is Jesus Christ will not fail. He will not fail. He is the rock that you build your life on. He is the only foundation that the Bible gives us, that Christians are given to build your foundation on. It is Christ himself. In the book of Hebrews, which is one of those great books, I love the book of Hebrews because it really challenges a lot of the Jewish mindset into have you really put your hope and your faith in God? Because if you have, then why do you struggle with so many things that you're kind of caught up in the humanness of life and you don't recognize who Christ himself is? And if you go to Hebrews, I think it's chapter number 5, where he's talking about Jesus being a better high priest, because he does a lot of these comparisons. This is what he does with them. He says, and I have a whole lot more to say about this that you need to hear. He said, but the problem is you are dull of listening. You don't care. It's as if you're still children and you need to be bottle fed rather than to understand the things that are going to cause you to have to dig deep and to work and build your life upon. He says in there, by now, because of how long you've been a Christian, you should be teaching yourself. You should be the one going out and sharing these things yourself. But instead, it's like you have to keep coming back to me. This is what he says to them, and I still got to get another bottle. Okay, Oh, I'm having a bad day. Oh, sorry about that. So you had a bad, so here we go again. Man, you should have some strength in your life by now. You should be the one sharing out of your own experiences, with other people, because you have learned the difference in what is really good and what is worth pursuing and what is not worth pursuing, because you have been there and you can share those stories. Listen, for us, in our time, in our culture, the tendency is just to become complacent and become dull of hearing. And just to think, well, I don't really need to know those things. And more than anything else, what I would pray for, I pray this for myself, I would pray this for you also. Lord, stir us up. Make us realize how important this is, how desperately we need these things, how we have to have these things built into our own lives, because listen, the time is coming where if they're not built and we don't develop some foundations and some strengths, our house will be shaken because we just not built it on the right thing. It's not built on being a good person. It's not built on, God, give me all good things, It's built upon the solid foundation of who Jesus Christ is, and he stands up to all those things. One last question. I told you I'd answer this question. How do you know what the foundation of someone's life is? It's not what you think, because a lot of people, like I said, go to language and things like that. It's not what you think. In fact, in this same passage, Jesus actually spoke of how you would know. And again, it's an either-or thing. And let me take you real quickly. This is what he says concerning the Pharisees. He says, beware of the false prophets. And he calls a lot of them that. He said, who come to you in sheep's clothing and are inwardly ravenous wolves. In other words, their real desire is to use this just to get what they want, out of it. And he says, you will know them by their what? Say it with me. You will know them by their, what comes out of their life. In time, you will know. You will tell. Fruit doesn't come up on a tree immediately. But in time, here's what you will figure out. You'll look at them and say, well, let me just tell you. I can listen to their life. I can look at their life. There is this incredible confidence in their life and who they are. And he makes this statement. This is more of a proverb itself. This is just a wisdom statement. He says, grapes are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, are they? And you and I would say, nope, absolutely. You know better than that. Exactly. So he says, eventually the fruit will show you what the life is really all about. And he goes on and says this, so every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce bad fruit, nor a bad tree produce good fruit. This is how you know. What is the foundation of someone's life? Just give it time. You'll find out. Storms will come. Difficulties will come. The floods will come. The rains will come. It's true for me. It's true for you. What will you run to? What will you anchor yourself to? Where will you go back and grab hold of? And if you go back and you grab hold of that sure foundation, because that's what you've built your life upon, listen, the fruit will be clear. It will show in anyone's life. That's the wonderful thing about it. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you challenge us. You get us to look at things that normally we would not look at and we would not understand, because you have good things for us. Good plans for us. And Lord, we thank you that you called us. You built us. You made us for depth, for going deep, not just staying shallow. And you built us to have a life that is not just good all the time and everything works our way, but to have a life that is strong, that is sure, that even when difficult times come, they don't catch us off guard, because they don't catch you off guard. And you are way, way strong enough to hold us and to keep us through those difficult times. here this morning and maybe some of the things that we talked about, some of the verses that we shared about, they really challenge you, then, now is the time to make a change. And say, God, teach me some new habits. I don't want to be caught off guard. Maybe you're in a situation even this morning where you say, I have been caught off guard. I wasn't prepared for this. I had no place to run to. I had no place to go. The wonderful news of the gospel itself is you have a place to go. God calls us to himself to build our lives a good life, but to build it on a great foundation, a foundation that will not be moved. And God has made himself known. He reveals himself. Christ has come to make sure that you understand just how much God wants you to know him and how much God wants to know you. So now's the time. Say, I'm going to change my habits. I'm going to do some things differently. I'm going to build my life on that sure foundation as we pray in Christ's name.